as everything comes online here, I am Dr. Paul Dyer. Welcome to Bridges Live Presents Mental Health Mondays. But as you know, every day and every time we have a conversation, it's about information, understanding, and action. I'm going to share my screen. For those of the people who are not listening through the podcast, you can see this screen up on your live. And what this is showing is that we're having a conference at Morgan State on July. We, as in the Caucus of African American Leaders and other partners, whether it be NAACP, whether it be the United Black Clergymen, whether it's just the Urban League, we are developing what you call Crisis in the Black Community Conference. And that is to go over policy, procedures, and develop a curriculum for Black America in Maryland and to take it throughout the United States. So this is why I'm going to leave it up here for people to understand. You can always contact me for more information. But ultimately, here's what you ought to do. Share it. Tell people to show up with their voice, their solutions, and not just your complaints. There's a damn difference. Don't just show up with complaints. I want you to show up with solutions, because we're going to be having breakout rooms and all that stuff. So that was my little commercial break for the show. And now let's get to what we're going to be talking about is mental health in America, in the state of America, as we know today. Now, we know there's tons of stuff going on, and James, I'm going to have you introduce yourself and what people do and what you do about education. And then I'm going to have Mr. Stephen introduce himself to the Bridges Live community. James, please go ahead.
Greetings, everyone. Again, as Dr. Dwyer said, my name is James Alexander, and the work that I do is in primarily three areas. One is as an executive coach, helping people be more effective as far as making decisions, planning their actions, and achieving their goals. I work a lot with individuals that are leaders, executives, individuals that want to be executives in our community. The other thing that I do is I work with organization development. That's helping moving organizations to, again, be more effective, reach their goals, manage conflict, and also deal with some of the important issues in the workforce, like change management, cultural competency, and workforce development, just to name a few. The other thing that I've done, and it really speaks to why I'd like to have this conversation today, I've done a lot of work in my community in helping individuals become more empowered as far as enabling them to reach out and attain their goals, be successful in their goals. But one of the things that comes up over and over and over again in the work that I do, as people try to strive forward to be successful, they kind of slam into a wall sometimes. And that wall is internal. It's called internalized racism. And what I'm talking about is that a lot of people don't understand in our society, in this American society, or I'd say Western culture, is that Black people receive so many negative images about ourselves, negative information about ourselves, that we start internalizing those messages. We start believing them, accepting them, and then ultimately acting on them. And that's just very, very unfortunate. So on one hand, when you have this internalized racism, people aren't able to be effective as far as reaching, being empowered in their lives, okay? On another aspect of internalized racism, people start treating others in a very negative way because they see them also from the negative images that they get. And let me give you some examples. Like in the media, you see always see negative images of Black people, people of color in the news, in so many situations. I remember in an earlier presentation, Dr. Dry pointed out, like sometimes you sort of in critique when they had the hurricane, Black people were looting, but the same things that white people were saying were doing, they found stuff. You know what I mean? In so many situations, if there's a murder or whatever, if there's a Black person, you always project their face. If there's a white person, you can't find them. You know what I mean? And it also goes as far as the institutions are concerned. In educational institutions, you have what's called the achievement gap, okay? But the achievement gap is really the failure of these institutions to meet the needs of our Black and brown brothers and sisters, okay? And so what they're doing is they're blaming the victim, okay? So they project all this negative image and information about we can't achieve, and they really haven't done their job. So I could go to public safety, I could go to housing, I just go on and on.
Steve,
so I'm going to stop right there.
Good, because we got tons of stuff to talk to. Stephen, please tell people what you do, and you out of D.C., we're not going to hold that against you because I'm a Bronx kid out of New York, so we'll keep dark country. So go ahead, Mr. D.C.
Yes, I'm by way of DC. I'm Stephen Underwood. I'm a global corporate peacemaking officer with my company, UCAN Global Multicultural Consultancy Group, LLC. Thank you for inviting me to be here and to join you and Mr. James this afternoon. What I do is I deal in spiritual intelligence, but I classify it under divine inclusive intelligence in the spiritual quotient space that deals with emotional intelligence, cognitive intelligence, and physical intelligence. What I do also, like with Mr. James, I help professionals, executives, and business owners. I help them deal with stress, anxiety, and burnout in their daily lives so that they can operate at the optimum health capacity that they possibly can. And I help with creating psychological safe spaces as well as corporate equity to where everyone in the organization can find profitability in and through that company. And one thing that Mr. James said that is of a truth is that we're dealing with a time now where there is almost a conflict of interest of implicit and explicit biases. And so what we have to do now is we have to help our brown, as he said, our brown and our Black-skinned brothers and sisters, help them get over this imposter syndrome of thinking that they're not worthy to ascertain the height of success that majority of our white counterparts and those of non-color have achieved and have accomplished throughout their lifetime. And so I'm so glad to be here. And again, I'm Stephen Underwood out of Washington, D.C. But I'm an international child. I was born in Torreón de Llanos, Madrid, Spain. And so I have a global contextualization in my background as well. But glad to be here, Dr. Dyer, and also with you, Mr. James.
So I want to lay out something because when I contacted my brothers here, they said, I want you guys on the show tonight because today is mostly Mental Health Monday that I do. But there's a lot of things that's been going on in our social environment that causes an unrest on a health perspective, on a international internal health perspective. So I asked my brothers in this because we're constantly helping people to get through something, but we have to recognize something first. So let me just lay out a couple of points that I think it's not the state of the world, but it's the state of where we're at right now. We have roughly 330 million people in the United States, just roughly, right? So right now, this is what we know. Interest rate is at 9%. We have transgender issues, which is like a human rights issue. We have unemployment, people who are underemployed, people who have so much more talent, but they're not getting hired on the level they are, right? We have safety issues. We just had 12 mass shootings this weekend, right? So we also have about 80 million people who are out of work. We are in almost like I feel like it's the perfect storm of the revolution. That's so I'm going to have this almost like a double Dutch where I'm going to just turn the rope and you guys just jump in. I don't know if you guys ever double Dutch before where you got to find that little rhythm and get on in when you fit in. But when we talk about health, we talk about emotional, spiritual, intelligence. We talk about social health, environmental health. We talk about all these different things, and yet we as Black community keep missing a mark. That's where our sicknesses is at. Is either recognizing or expressing themselves. If it is expressing themselves, then it's not expressing to the right people so you can get on the right track. So we're like all over this chessboard, and yet we're still being the pawns that are getting killed. So what do you guys think? Because we're in... Go ahead.
Yeah, there's a saying, even if you're on the right track, if you just stand there, you'll still get run over. So I'm thinking about what you're saying. We're trying to, move forward in a positive direction. And the conference that you talked about is a good example of that. Okay. But it's like a polarity there. I started talking about, internalized racism. So there is always been an impulse for us as Black people, Black and brown people, to be free and to be liberated from the oppression that we face. And I, just want to be clear. When I talk about internalized racism, I'm talking about the cause of that is racial oppression. Okay, I'm not talking about no discrimination or nothing like that. Like making a bad choice. I'm talking about purposeful oppression of Black people. Okay. So we need to be clear on that as a starting point. We're really not going to be effective in moving forward for our own liberation.
But James, probably the one thing we have a problem with liberation is that we keep trying to liberate ourselves, but we don't know how to move forward, and we're not willing to go to the class or get the education to be liberated. We just want to complain about liberation. Because you got to show up to be taught how to be liberated.
We had this discussion before, and I absolutely agree with you. There's a lot more work we need to do in our communities. But if you look at what's happened over the years with the internalized racism, very often we're turned against each other. Mm-hmm. But that I think sometimes people miss a very important part of this. Internalized racism comes from the messages that we get. So some of the negative messages is to block out the achievements and the success that Black people have had over the years. Like some people think that Black Wall Street, that riot and killing all those Black people, that only happened one time in America. Isn't that true?
True. At least that's what they keep talking about. Right.
A part of the racial oppression of Black people is whenever we came together and we were successful, then white people came in and they didn't steal it. Okay, they just jammed us and took everything. Black people were literally running for their lives. Okay, so we need to be clear about the success that we've had and the fact that we do have that's the innate desire to be free and also to work together with each other. So we don't want to just knock ourselves down. We want to have an appreciative inquiry about what we've done and what we can build on going into the future. I
think that's key. I think that's key what Mr. James is saying and what you just stated, Dr. Dyer. There's been a miseducation of the Black and brown skinned people. I was telling my oldest son some months ago, I said, if the truth of histocracy, as we know it here in Western world and America, was to truly be uncovered, it would literally have to be rewritten. Mm-hmm. I said, a lot of people don't know that out there in Grand Canyon, all of that is protected by governmental forces. And the reason why is that there is no understanding, or there is no insight of knowledge that out there in the Grand Canyon, that's our people's stuff. That is one of the oldest Kemetic civilizations that have been discovered here in America on the Western continent. So when you're talking about, and what Mr. James is talking about, education, it comes down to the truth has to be told. I'm talking about politically,
Okay.
socially, culturally, psychologically. So let's throw psychologically under medical. Dr. Harriet Washington did a study in her book on, medical apartheid.
Right.
And then Dr. Joy DeGeary Leary, she dealt with PTSD, post-traumatic slave syndrome. So you have centuries of, as James said, you have centuries of systematic oppression, internally, externally. And I believe our people have complained, and we have complained to the right sources, and even sometimes to the right people. But it fell on deaf ears. And I say that for a reason. It fell on deaf ears because those who we were complaining to, our ancestors,
correct.
And this isn't far removed,
No.
Dr. Dyer. This isn't far removed. We're talking about 64 to 70-something years of separation, where people have not gotten the proper psychological, social, cultural, and even spiritual help.
Correct.
So now we're dealing with a 21st century problem going into 2022 and beyond.
Mm-hmm.
Now you have this group of people.
But Stephen,
who are now,
we've been telling them this. You have been telling them this. James has been telling them this. We have been telling them this. If it's not just this year, we know brothers. I know Dr. Amos Wilson, learning from him, he was telling us in the 70s and 80s. Hell, I saw a lecture of him in the late 80s. He has been telling us, teaching us. There has been teachers. There has been people being shot over it. There's been people being assassinated over it.
yeah.
Where are we missing the education? It's been taught.
I think one of the things that has been missing from the Black cultural element of what they're trying to do with all of this great replacement theory,
Right.
all this critical race theory, where we had folks in our communities, what we call our elders.
Mm-hmm.
You don't hear stuff like that no more. We had elders that would, traveling from point A to point B. Hey, come here, young cat. Let me spit some game to you. And they would sit there and they would tell you how things work. So now you are having a generation. You have now 5 generations that are on the face of this planet. You have Generation X, baby boomer generation. You have Generation X. You have millennials. You have Generation Y, Generation Z. So now you have all this conglomerate of a whole entire generation that is not only miseducated, but it's being misrepresented in the whole contextualization of as it deals with society, culture, and even political.
Well, now we're dealing with misinformation.
Yes.
Now we're dealing with, and James, you talk about misinformation. We trying to get people the information, and people are still YouTubing, Snapchatting misinformation.
So what you're looking at is a couple of things. I think it's important, and that people use the term education, but very often what they're talking about is the socialization process.
Right.
And that's a little different.
Right. Yeah.
Because the socialization process teaches people to act in accordance with certain norms. Mm-hmm. Okay. So with oppressed people, sometimes those norms are not even to their advantage. Okay. And we've seen that happen in the continent, when you're talking about freedom of African countries and whatnot. A lot of the young African leaders went to Western colleges and universities. And again, they not only earned degrees, but they were also socialized to think a certain way. And values and, and some of those implicit values led to greed and led to internalized racism, where they didn't even appreciate the value of their brothers and sisters, and they looked more towards where they got the so-called education and socialization from. Okay, so if we're looking to move things forward, we have to be aware of that. And my position is, I think we need to make a concrete effort to challenge those images that are so abundant in the education and socialization process, and make people aware of that. Because right now, people don't have that self-awareness. They think they're doing what they're supposed to be doing. I mean, but everybody knows that the reality of a Black person, a person of color, is very different from the reality of a white person. You know what I mean? There's that whole thing of white privilege.
And that's
what are we
and I think
dealing with recovery replacement theory. White person privilege, which is the reality, and then we're running and scuffling from these crazy racist fools that are talking about replacement theory.
And I think when we talk about 9% interest rate, high interest rate hurts who the most? Lower economically people, majority Black and brown. That's just a fact. When we talk about human rights issues, it affects lower economic people, predominantly Black and brown. That's the health of America is the sickness of Black America. And we are struggling with not just unifying ourselves, but we keep going back to the misrepresentation of even our own spirituality or our own intelligence. Now we're stuck in a conundrum that we're so trauma-filled, we're chasing shadows. Again, are we in the perfect storm of a revolution that's only going to get us killed more quickly, or a revolution that's only going to put us underfoot of another regime? Because right now, the health we have collectively isn't there.
Yeah,
okay, go ahead.
No, I agree with that assessment. And one of the things about, you saying that we're dwelling in the dark, first thing we have to, recognize, as you said earlier in your statement, we have to recognize that there is a problem. And the first thing of recognizing that we're in the darkness, we have to be willing to face the light, no matter how much that light blinds us. And what the light to us is, we must face our own truth, and not the truth of what Western civilization has said, not the truth of what the white man said, not the truth of what the Asiatic world said, but what our truth is as a group of people. Again, we are, and I believe that we are in a perfect situation. This pandemic has placed the Black race of people. I said this to another business owner that's African American. I said, it's almost as if the powers that be, God, or whoever you want to call him, I choose to call him God. It's like he gave us a perfect situation during this pandemic for the Black race of people to deal with
and break free,
face with, to come forth and to absolutely deal with all of the social ills that we find in our society, in our culture, and around the globe. Because there's been no other people on the face of the planet that have been socially, culturally, societally, and even economically, financially, have been oppressed.
Right.
Like that of the Black, like that of, you could go anywhere in the world. Like my brother just spent 26 years in Japan. And how many people know here in America and abroad know that up in those mountains of Japan are your folks?
Yep.
With a beard that look like you, Dr. Dyer.
I know.
And they're called ancient folks.
Yep.
They call them the ancient ones. And so my point of saying that is that we have to be willing to, at all costs. No more is it going to take, because we're now in the age of Aquarius. This isn't going to be a individualism type of effort. This is going to take a global community, collective and cooperative, not just a collaborative, but a cooperation. We must be willing to cooperate with one another and be willing to uncover our truth at all costs, even if it means the destruction of all of us, because they can't kill all of us. Now, one-on-one, they can take all of us separately out, but collectively as a group, because like this, we're nothing. But like this, we can do damage. And so it's time for us to come together collectively and collaboratively and cooperatively and deal with our truth. Again, not what the Western world has said, not what the white man has said, but deal with our truth, what they have purposely hid on purpose around the world and even here in America.
So I so heartily agree with you. And this goes back to the perfect storm, like you said. This is the perfect storm for us to break free or to die under. And we have been oppressed. We're the only people in the world that has been circumcised through every economic collaboration possible. And yet we still come out. If this is our perfect storm to rise, and we know that self-oppression, right, James? If we don't get past our self-oppression, we don't see the light or the truth. If we don't get in touch with our spiritual intelligence, we will never be able to have our truth. And I believe the collective noise has been killing our prefrontal cortex for cognitive development that we can never get to the internal self or the spiritual self. I think that's where they've been attacking us for a while now. And what I mean by a while, almost like 30 years, they're stopping our development of our cognitive being, which is connected to our...
I think it's more than 30 years. I think you're talking about intergenerational trauma. So, I mean, that's like hundreds of years. You know what I mean? What I remember, what was it? Black History Month. You know, I went around, I think I shared with you guys before, and I just threw out some numbers. Like, during the Holocaust, at the most 9 million Jews were killed. Okay. However, if you look at what happened in this country, the genocide against Native Americans, that's 56 million people. Mm-hmm. And if you look at what happened to Black people, as far as the passage and the subsequent oppression, slavery, that's 156 million. So, I mean, you're talking about some fantastic numbers where you have that intergenerational trauma going forth for generation and generation. And the sister that has that book, Post-Traumatic Slave Syndrome, she points out that, you know what I mean, there hasn't been any information years about that. So that's just built up. And so, you know, we're coming to an awareness of that. But we need more than just awareness on that. We need wisdom, and we also need to act on getting outside of that pressure. We need to be able to look at the big picture of what's going on, okay? And when we look at the big picture, we see that there's a different dynamic as far as neocolonialism and so-called globalization that's happening right now, okay? And so there's a lot of opportunity there, but if we just continue to accept the definition of the challenges that we face given to us by the white media, by white leaders, we're not going to be able to take advantage of that. Because one of the things I think you all realize, if you listen to any of the leaders going all the way back to the 50s and 60s, Malcolm X, Martin Luther King, Muhammad Ali,
Marcus Garvey.
Right. The things that they said back then, you could just apply them to our situation right now. Okay. So you understand the reason why a lot of times they're not around is because they were telling the truth. Okay. And that's what we have to do. We have to look at this situation and come up with our own solutions, not the solutions that other people are trying to give us that are really not in our best interest.
How are, you know, and during this midterm election, which I believe is the most important election we have coming up on our time. I believe we're in Reconstruction period, and what you call the second Reconstruction. We know what happened after the first Reconstruction. I think we're now in the second Reconstruction. I think if we understand the woes that happened after the first Reconstruction, the hanging and the killing and the onslaughts of different communities, if we don't understand who we are, prepare ourselves for what's coming, there's going to be more communities going to be burnt up, shot up, and destroyed because the second Reconstruction's coming. It's here.
And it's coming. And what you said is here. Because I had the privilege to go to the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. And what you were talking about previously about, the separation of our spirituality from our naturalism or our nature of who we are as human beings. I attended this U.S. Chamber of Commerce, and I just sat there and just watched and I listened. And the gentleman said something very interesting. He was quoting a whole entire passage out of the book of Isaiah. And I just sat there and I was like, whoa. I said, now, hold on. They're sitting here enforcing societally and culturally, they're snatching the Bible and snatching, spirituality away from us like you take cookie from a baby. But yet here it is, this man in the U.S. Chamber of Commerce just quoted almost a half of a whole passage of the second book of the book of Isaiah, which is a large volume. Mm-hmm. And I just sat there and I was like, wow. And so I went home and I said, like, these folks are getting ready to flip the switch on a whole total different game.
Yep.
And we just now getting used to this game. I'm talking about economically, politically, religiously, and all this. And these folks are getting ready to switch the game. And so what you're saying and what James has said has guided me into what it is that I do. And I've been doing for over the past 25 years in trying to help people understand, listen, you must come to a high apex of yourself. And the highest apex of yourself is spiritual intelligence, your spiritual quotient, which informs your emotional, which informs your cognitive, which informs your physical. No more can you allow these three entities to inform your spiritual and you be out of control emotionally, you be out of control cognitively, you be out of control physically, because now you are going to have to tell yourself, behave when we go out here. Because listen, what you do or what you don't do just might get you killed. Just the way you look and the way that I'm talking about the way that you breathe, because no longer in times past, you two gentlemen, and I believe James is a little bit, historically aware of American culture than I am, because I was born outside of American society. But my point is this, previously, if you looked at a white person in the eye, you could get killed for it. But now, just because of the way you look, the way you carry yourself, whether you are an educated person or not, you can die. Mm-hmm. All this stuff dealing with George Zimmerman, this cop that had the knee on Floyd. Mr. Gardner Floyd's neck. Mm-hmm. And it's like, when does this insanity end? And I believe that you have started at a good point of bringing these minds together, yourself, Mr. James, myself, and then the flyer that you did before the talk took place. Because no longer, as James said, no longer can we just rest our laurels on awareness.
No,
we can't, because if we do not wake out of this slumber, both cognitively, emotionally, physically, and definitely spiritually, because what you said earlier, they have tainted, they have tampered with us spiritually. I mean, what did they do when they came to our continent? They introduced us with a white Bible and saying that, a white Jesus. And then you start reading in the Bible, you come to find out, hold up, this man got woolly hair, eyes like flame of fire, feet like brass. Man, that sounds like a brother. That sounds like me. And so I believe it starts with, again, collaboration, collectivism, and cooperation. We need to start mass producing this information to where, like what you just said in the early part of the call, we must move now with massive action, because we don't have time like we did in the 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s. No. We have no time, because again, these folks are getting ready to flip the switch, and a lot of our brown and dark-skinned people are getting ready to be absolutely left in the dark.
And I think that's why I love having this show. I own this show. This is my show. This is what I do. But yet I know it gets as much as it gets pushed out there and as much as it gets downloaded and as much as I get feedback, I still don't think we're reaching the 330 million people in the U.S. And if we're only 17% of that in the U.S., that means we're only 129 million black and brown people in the United States. We have black media that doesn't get enough push. We don't even have our own black news public station. We got cable. We know we got the online stuff. We got a bunch of stuff. Like I'm online and stuff, but we don't have our national. We still got to go through those gatekeepers, and we got to surpass those gatekeepers. We got to be like, you can keep your key. I don't need your damn key or your gate. I'm way over here anyway. But yet the black people, black America does not come. We have to go to them, meet them where they're at, right? We always say we got to meet people where they're at. Well, we're in a time frame because we don't have time. I don't know where you at, but you need to come out and let me know. You got to come find us and say.
I think part of what we're looking at is look at the situation, the system of oppression that we face is going back to something I mentioned earlier about how we define the situation. I mean, one of the things that both of you guys have mentioned, and it's a regenerative theme as far as us moving towards the positive spaces, we need a holistic perspective, okay? And we're not given a holistic perspective from general media and whatnot. They're just giving us pieces of here, pieces of there, things that really, and so it's up to us to look at the larger piece, like we're American citizens and whatnot. But I think it's to our disadvantage to just look at what's going on here in this country. I think it's important for us to think more like global citizens, understand how we can reach out to others in other countries and other cultures, and have a larger worldview of what's going on. Because if we just let our concept of ourselves, our worldview of ourselves, be defined by the same people who are racial oppression us, we're not going to ever be able to get about that. We need to get a larger perspective. And part of it starts from us internally, understanding, this post-traumatic slave mentality that we have, and doing the work on that, and then bringing our brothers and sisters in, So, again, it's not an easy process. It's a hard process in some ways, but it's very rewarding. I mean, when you see young people making positive decisions, moving past all the distractions that we have, in our society right now, it keeps people from looking, and the importance of how to move away from oppression. Instead of just looking at Black Lives Matter through this country, we need to look at that all over the world.
So James, you said do the work internally, and it is rewarding. And I'm going to mention the city that we're all three of us is close near, that has so much shooting going on. It's almost like an arcade game. Baltimore City. I without saying it and getting choked up and crying about it, it's horrific. I thought I grew up in an area where it was gang violence or this or New York and all that stuff. But Baltimore City, it's a whole different planet of mentally depressed population that is creating the dismay. And it's holding the whole city hostage. Is there a way? There's a way. We know there's a way. It takes the work. But how can we create a better way to stop this violence? Not in just Baltimore, but in any city, any place, any community that is so prevalent. And it's not just it's not a gang violence. It's just young people shooting. It's something else. It's a whole different feel. Stephen?
One thing I tell you that in my own personal life, I'm just 52 years of age. And one thing that my mother and father did for me. And this was at the height of the early 80s. My mother was operating in such a level of spiritual intelligence, spiritual quotient. She had 5 sons. I was the third out of the 5. And she knew, she said, I cannot allow my family to stay, because my father got out of the Air Force. We moved to Youngstown, Ohio. And this is when cocaine was at its height, and it was converting from cocaine to crack. And my mother was like, nope. I know I can't have all these 9 children I got, and especially these 5 boys I got, and out of the 5, that one that I know is a knucklehead. I can't leave him. I can't leave him up here. So she done my whole entire family a favor and moved us to a small coal mining town in Harlan County, Kentucky. But when we got down there, I found that some of the same inner city social and cultural ills that the inner city was dealing with, man, I did, because everywhere we lived, I did research everywhere we lived. And so when we got there to Harlan County, I was like, this place was once called Bloody Harlan. And they said it was no thing for you to look up into the tree line and find a black man hanging. I looked at my parents, I looked at my mother, I said, now hold up. I said, I know you're highly intelligent. I know that, you operating off a whole other different other. I said, but what in God's name would make you move us here? Like what James, dealing with internal racism. Soon as we got to the school and my dad enrolled us, had this big breaded white boy. I mean, I'm talking about no restraint. I'm talking no problem. Just called me the N-word. Didn't know what it meant. Had to go to the library to find out what it meant. And then they took up 2 other African-Americans, said, this young man just disrespected you. So me and my older 2 brothers, we walked up on him and said, listen, you got one more time. I said, one more time. I said, then you gonna have problems. So he started looking around. But anyway, I believe it's going to start with filling this void that is in our young people.
It's there.
Right. And it's there. We need to fill this void. And my whole point of saying that, we need people that move and that act with the youth like my mother did with her own children. Move in wisdom. Move in a higher sense of intelligence, of insight. Listen, baby, I know you don't fully understand why I'm doing this, but it's really for your whole makeup and your whole totality of your safety, because I see what's coming. I see what's coming. And so I believe it's gonna take really like what you said, meeting these young people where they are, but not only just meeting where they are, but like what Dr. Martin Luther King said, the ultimate measure of a man or a woman is not where they stand in the place of convenience and comfort, but the ultimate measure of a man or woman is where they stand in the times of controversy and challenge. And listen, we are in no more other controversial and challenging times than right now.
Right now.
Mm-hmm. Because we're losing our young men. I'm pretty sure James probably has statistics on this, but we're losing our young black men at an all-time rate, way past incarceration.
Way past. It's way past that. Yeah. You look at the demographics of Planned Parenthood. You look at the demographics of just single family mother households. And then on top of that, we're losing our youth, and especially our young men, because any foundation of any civilization is with its not only youth, but it's with its men. Right, young
men. If you do not have a solid, strong foundation of men to build a society off of and with, what do you have?
And they've already prostituted the young men. You could tell by the saggy pants. They've already demasculated the men, because you could tell how they want to dress. You could tell they demasculate them because they don't teach them the English and the spelling. So they're uneducated, unread, no mathematics skills, and then they're demasculated by the saggy of the pants and the feminine dress and the feminine ways. So they've already instituted that in them at such a young age, and they call it their culture. And it's not their culture. It was something that was put on them like crack cocaine.
And just like what you just stated, and with the book that James and I mentioned, post-traumatic slave syndrome, Dr. Joy, she says in her book, she says, listen, a mother who sits there and talking to a white mother, and the white mother's praising her child, and then it gets to the, how's your child doing? Oh, he's not doing well, and she totally demasculates him. Why? Not because she doesn't want to praise him, because she doesn't want to put him above this white child, because she knows as soon as she does, my child is going to be a mark.
Right. And that's that institutionalism.
Exactly. And what James talked about this, and then institutionalized racism. Then we deal with the imposter syndrome of internalizing. Oh, you know what? I'm not worthy of this. And then we have astute master degrees, bachelor degrees, sometimes triple master degrees and PhD. I'm talking about, and we still have these young people, and not only young people, and even some middle-aged people that are dealing with these psychological, cognitive, emotional, unstable, healthy. They look good on the outside appearance. They got themselves together in their Benz and their Beamer. But then when you start talking and dealing with them internally,
it's broken.
They're jacked up from the floor. So I believe it has to come down to replacing this void that is in these young people, and not only these young people, but that are in some of our parental units and in some of even our older people.
Right.
That we know that is out there. This is why we got older men that are still in their 50s and 60s wearing throwback jerseys, talking about I'm holding down the block, but you don't even own the block that you living on.
Right. I ran into another brother that just did the same thing. Where are you wearing a throwback jersey? He goes, yeah, because I'm keeping it real. What real? It has never been real. Hold on. Never been real. What real are you talking about? James?
So I agree 100% with what's been said, as far as us understanding that a lot of people think they're acting on what's good, you know what I mean? But we have to understand, we do understand. The system is doing what it's supposed to do,
right?
Okay, right. That is create an environment where we continue to be oppressed, where we continue to be subject to internalized racism. Okay, that's it. What we need to do is realize what is the most effective way for us to push back on that. Okay, because there's knowledge and then there's wisdom. Okay, we need wisdom. Okay, and from my point of view, that wisdom comes from us acting collectively among ourselves, and again, working internally so that we see our environment the way it is, not the way somebody tells us it is. And that's why I want to use that example. If we look at what our forefathers were telling us years ago, the situation is essentially the same. Okay. However, there are some opportunities there, and we need to take advantage. So that's why I go back to, I'm glad you're having that conference in July. There's other things that are going on also. We need to make sure that the message about the positive things that people are doing to change the mindset, we need to make sure that we communicate that we distribute that as much as possible, okay? Because the bottom line, I think, a lot of people in our community, because of the internalized racism, the profiling, whatnot, we're just plain depressed.
Yes.
I mean, we talk about mental health, we're just depressed. So that's why we deal with drugs. Yep. And we have excesses for our tech, all these other things. We get involved in materialism because, again, it's the condition. And a lot of people don't understand that. They think that's the way it's supposed to be. There's that statement that's attributed to Harriet Tubman. She said, I freed 1,000 slaves, and I could have freed 1,000 more if they knew they were slaves. Mm-hmm. Okay? So that's what we need to be looking at. We need to be looking at that situation.
I just love our conversation today. I just let everybody know again, and I'll keep doing this until July 8th, is that we're having a Black Action Convention, and that means bring your voice, bring your policy, bring your solution. It's 2 days of event. So we start at 9 a.m. in the morning till 6 at night. Everyone in the state is invited, coming from the Eastern Shore to the Western Shore. And my brothers here, they're going to be able to make it if they can. But this is not just the end or the start. This is a continuation of men, people, and many getting together to build our community, because our time is now. It's not tomorrow. It's preparedness on every level, emotionally, spirituality, physically, environmental. We have to attack this not just one at a time, but all the pinheads have to be put together. We cannot hold back anymore going, I need to wait on this. Hell no, the hell to the no. No more waiting, right? You got to do it now, period. I love you guys. Anything you want to say, Stephen, before we take off?
I just want to say what James touched on. He talked about neocolonialism. Neocolonialism today is the new globalization.
Yeah.
It is the new globalization. And if and like what he said, and I'll just end with this, if we're not willing to wake up now, we never will. If we don't wake up now, we will be forever. However state you find yourself, you will be forever in that state, whether it be emotionally, cognitively, physically, spiritually. But now is the time, as Dr. Dyer and James said, now is the time, people, for us to rise, to awaken out of slumber, and for us to collectively and collaboratively and cooperatively come together.
Thanks, everyone. This is Bridges.
Amen.
Thanks, everyone. You guys stay on. We'll talk off air. Thanks, everyone, for listening to Bridges Live. I'm Dr. Paul. You can also catch us on all your podcast channels and all your live social feeds. And just put in Bridges Live, and then we'll pop right up and you pick out our show. Thank you so much. God bless. Be compassionate. Be kind. Be safe.